The chain axe screamed through ceramide armor. Brother Captain Valerius felt his gene seed burning. His flesh rippled, his bones stretched. The Chaos Champion standing over him smiled with too many teeth. "You killed my brothers," Valerius whispered, blood pooling beneath his shattered power armor. "And now you'll join them," the champion replied, pressing the chaos mark deeper into Valerius's chest. "But not as their brother." The mark seared through skin, through soul. Valerius screamed as his memories of the Emperor began to fade. His oaths crumbled like ash. His righteousness curdled into rage. The champion's laughter echoed through the burning cathedral. "Welcome to the long war, brother." Valerius's eyes opened. They burned crimson now. His hands found the chain axe. The weight felt perfect. The smell of incense turned to sulfur. The cold stone floor radiated heat. His enhanced hearing caught whispers in languages that predated humanity. He stood slowly. His armor had changed. Brass spikes jutted from his shoulders. His helmet had grown horns. The champion nodded approvingly. "You feel it, don't you? The hunger. The endless, beautiful hunger." Valerius did feel it. A gnawing emptiness that demanded blood, that demanded skulls. His chapter's battle cry died on his lips. New words formed instead. Ancient words. Violent words. "Blood for the blood god," he whispered. The champion's smile widened. "Good. But that's just the beginning." Valerius looked at his hands, at the chain axe, at the corpses of his former battle brothers scattered across the cathedral floor. He felt nothing for them now. Less than nothing. He felt hungry. "What happens next?" Valerius asked, his voice already deeper, rougher. The champion gestured toward the cathedral's massive doors. Beyond them, screams echoed through the hive city. Civilians running, guardsmen dying. "Now you learn what it truly means to serve chaos," the champion said. "Now you discover what happens when you become one of us." Valerius gripped the chain axe tighter. The brass felt warm against his palm. Alive. "And if I refuse?" The champion's laughter shook dust from the vaulted ceiling. "Refuse? Brother, you already chose. The moment you felt that hunger. The moment you spoke his name." Valerius realized the champion was right. The hunger was growing stronger, more demanding. He could smell fresh blood in the streets outside. So what happens to a chaos champion who feeds that hunger? The champion's eyes gleamed with ancient malice. "That, brother, is where our real story begins. In the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, there is only war. But some wars are fought not on battlefields, but within the human soul. For 10,000 years, the Imperium of Man has stood as humanity's last bastion against the horrors of the galaxy. Its space marines, genetically enhanced super soldiers, serve as the Emperor's finest warriors. Bred for loyalty, conditioned for sacrifice, programmed to never break. Yet even the strongest steel can crack under enough pressure. This is the story of what happens when that programming fails. When devotion becomes doubt, when heroes become something else entirely. The transformation doesn't happen overnight. It begins with a single moment, a crack in the armor of faith that lets something dark seep in. The whispers start soft, promising power to those who feel abandoned by their god emperor. They offer strength to the weak, purpose to the lost, and terrible gifts to those brave enough to accept them. In the Warhammer 40,000 universe, these fallen warriors become Chaos Champions, beings who have traded their humanity for the favor of malevolent gods. They command legions of the damned, wield weapons that scream with bound demons, and their very presence corrupts reality itself. But the path to becoming a Chaos Champion isn't just about gaining power. It's about losing everything that once made you human. Your memories twist into lies. Your flesh warps into something unrecognizable. Your soul becomes a playground for entities that exist beyond mortal comprehension. Today, we follow that journey from the very beginning. From the first doubt that cracks a loyal heart, to the final moment when transformation becomes irreversible. We'll witness how heroes fall, how corruption spreads like a virus through the ranks of the Emperor's finest, how entire chapters of Space Marines can be turned against everything they once swore to protect. This isn't just a story about fictional warriors in a distant future. It's a meditation on how power corrupts, how isolation breeds extremism, and how the very qualities that make someone a hero, unwavering conviction, absolute loyalty, willingness to sacrifice, can become the tools of their own destruction. The temperature in the chapel drops as Brother Captain Thaddeus kneels before the golden Aquila. His prayers echo off cold stone walls, but tonight, something else echoes back, something that sounds almost like laughter. But the real horror hadn't even begun. Captain Valerius Thorn stood before the obsidian altar, his breath forming clouds in the freezing air of the abandoned shrine. The smell of copper and decay hung thick around him. 3 months. 3 months since his regiment had been abandoned on Tertius Prime. 3 months watching his men die from starvation and Xenos attacks while the Imperium forgot they existed. The voice in his head whispered again. Sweet. Reasonable. Your loyalty has been rewarded with nothing but death, Captain. I offer something different. Thorn's gauntleted hand trembled as he drew his combat knife. The blade caught the crimson light emanating from the altar's surface. He could feel the presence watching him. Ancient, patient, hungry. One simple cut, one drop of blood freely given, and I will grant you the power to save your men. Behind him, Sergeant Caney lay dying from a gut wound that wouldn't heal. 23 years they'd served together. 23 years of brotherhood that meant nothing to the bureaucrats who'd condemned them. The knife pressed against his palm. The metal felt warm now, eager. The Imperium calls me enemy. The voice purred. But what have they done for you lately, Captain? What has your faith earned you but graves? Blood welled up, dark and rich. It dripped onto the altar with a sound like rainfall on stone. The moment it touched the surface, everything changed. Power flooded through him. Raw, intoxicating, infinite. His wounds closed, his exhaustion vanished. He could feel his dying men across the camp, and he could heal them, save them, lead them to victory, but the blood kept flowing, more than he'd intended. The altar drank greedily, and with each drop, something else flowed back into him. Whispers, visions, a creeping certainty that mercy was weakness, that compassion was failure. When Thorn finally staggered back from the altar, his eyes had changed. Where once they'd held duty and honor, now they burned with something else entirely. He returned to camp as the sun rose, moving with inhuman grace. His men cheered when they saw their wounds healing, their strength returning. They didn't notice the way shadows seemed to follow their captain now. They didn't see the invisible chains that bound them all. Caney was the first to realize what had happened. As his gut wound sealed itself, he looked into Thorn's transformed eyes and whispered, "Emperor, preserve us. What have you done?" Thorn smiled, and for the first time, Caney saw the thing wearing his captain's face. But the real horror hadn't even begun. Captain Vex stood before the altar of skulls, his newly blessed chainsword humming with demonic energy. The weapon felt different now, heavier, hungry. Before him knelt 3 Imperial prisoners, a commissar, a tech priest, and a young guardsman barely old enough to shave. Their eyes held the hollow stare of those who knew death was coming. But this wasn't just execution. This was consecration. "The gods demand proof," whispered the Dark Apostle behind him. "Your first kill as champion must be meaningful." Vex's enhanced hearing caught every ragged breath, every whispered prayer from the prisoners. The commissar's lips moved silently. The litany of faith. The tech priest's mechadendrites twitched with nervous energy. The boy simply wept. The chainsword's teeth began spinning without Vex pulling the trigger. It wanted to taste Imperial blood. It wanted to drink their screams. Vex raised the weapon. The commissar looked up, defiant even in death. "The Emperor protects," he spat. "Not here," Vex replied. The blade descended. The commissar's head separated cleanly, rolling across the gore-slicked floor. But instead of blood, something else poured from the wound, a shimmering, golden light that the chainsword drank greedily. The weapon purred with satisfaction. Vex felt it then, the first true taste of what he'd become. Power flooded through him, raw and intoxicating. His muscles swelled. His senses sharpened beyond human limits. He could smell fear from kilometers away. The tech priest began reciting binary cant, his voice rising in mechanical panic. Vex silenced him with a backhand that shattered ceramite and flesh alike. 2 down, 1 to go. The boy looked up with tears streaming down his dirt-stained face. "Please," he whispered. "I have a sister on Cadia. She's only—" Cadia fell, Vex said quietly. The chainsword roared to life again. But as the blade touched the boy's throat, something unexpected happened. The weapon hesitated. For just a moment, Vex felt a flicker of his old self, the Imperial officer who'd once sworn to protect the innocent. Then the Dark Apostle's hand fell on his shoulder. "Doubt is weakness, champion, and weakness is death." The chainsword bit deep. As the boy's life faded, Vex felt the last of his humanity drain away with it. The transformation was complete now, irreversible. He was no longer Captain Vex of the Imperial Guard. He was something else entirely. But the real test was just beginning. Captain Vex Korath had served the Emperor for 37 years. His blade had never known defeat. His faith had never wavered, until the screaming started. It began during the siege of Tertius Prime. 3 months of grinding warfare against heretic cultists who carved symbols into their own flesh. Symbols that seemed to move when you weren't looking directly at them. The first whisper came as Korath pulled his chainsword from a cultist's chest. A voice, low and hungry, speaking words in a language he'd never heard, but somehow understood. "Your blade thirsts for more." Korath shook his head. Battle fatigue. Nothing more. He'd seen it claim stronger men than himself. But the voice returned the next day. And the next. Each kill brought the whispers closer. Each drop of spilled blood made the words clearer. The voice spoke of strength beyond mortal limits, of battles that would echo through eternity, of a God who rewarded those brave enough to embrace their true nature. Korath found himself lingering over fallen enemies, watching the light fade from their eyes, feeling something stir deep in his chest, something that wasn't entirely human anymore. His men began to notice the changes first, the way their captain's eyes lingered on fresh wounds, how he volunteered for the bloodiest assaults, the strange new prayers he muttered before battle. "Sir," Sergeant Voss approached after a particularly brutal skirmish. "The men are concerned." Korath turned, and Voss stepped back involuntarily. His captain's eyes had taken on a crimson tint. When Korath smiled, his teeth seemed sharper than before. Concerned about what, Sergeant? Your methods, sir. The prisoners yesterday. Korath's hand drifted to his chainsword. The weapon hummed with anticipation. Or maybe that was just his imagination. He doubts your strength, the voice whispered. Show him what you've become. For a moment, Korath saw two paths before him. One led back to the light of the Emperor, back to duty and honor and the slow decay of ordinary mortality. The other path pulsed red. Korath's grip tightened on his weapon. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, promising power, promising purpose, promising that he would never again know the weakness of doubt. Sergeant Voss took another step backward, but he wasn't fast enough. Captain Theron Vex had served the Emperor for 37 years. His power armor bore the scars of 100 battles. His faith had never wavered. Until the voices started, they whispered during the long watches between stars. Soft at first, like distant wind through cathedral spires. Then louder, more insistent. Your Emperor demands sacrifice. They hissed. But what has he sacrificed for you? Vex pressed his gauntleted hands against his temples. The cold ceramite offered no comfort against the burning questions that clawed at his mind. His company had been stranded on Mortis Prime for 6 months. No reinforcements, no supplies, just endless waves of heretics throwing themselves against their fortified position. The smell of rotting corpses hung thick in the recycled air of his helmet. Vex watched his battle brothers die one by one. Good men, faithful men, their last words always the same prayer to the Golden Throne. But the Emperor remained silent. He abandons his children, the voices crooned. As he abandoned you, the breaking point came when young brother Matthias bled out in Vex's arms, a boy who joined the chapter to serve humanity, to make a difference. Vex felt something crack inside his chest. Not bone, something deeper. That night, alone in the command bunker, he spoke the forbidden words, names that burned his tongue, promises that tasted of copper and ash. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in an instant. Frost spread across the walls like grasping fingers. His breath misted in the sudden cold as reality itself seemed to bend around his heretical prayer. Then she appeared. Not the crude demon he'd expected, but something beautiful. Terrible. Perfect. Her voice was silk and razors. You have called, and I have answered. Vex felt power flood through him. Raw, intoxicating. His muscles swelled beneath his armor. His mind expanded beyond mortal limitations. But the price, he looked down at his hands. Where once the imperial Aquila had been etched into his gauntlets, new symbols writhed, living tattoos that pulsed with unholy light. The transformation had begun. Vex understood now why champions of chaos were so feared. It wasn't just the power they wielded. It was what they'd willingly become to claim it. He thought of his men sleeping in the barracks below. Brothers who still trusted him, still believed in him. The demon princess smiled, reading his thoughts. Show them the truth, she whispered. Show them what their precious emperor really thinks of their devotion. Vex's hand moved to his bolt pistol, but the real horror hadn't even begun. Captain Varys felt the brand searing into his forehead. The brass mark of Khorne burned through flesh and bone, carving itself into his very soul. Steam rose from the wound. The scent of charred meat filled the ritual chamber. He had served the blood god faithfully for 3 years, slaughtered entire worlds, bathed in the gore of 1,000 enemies. Now Khorne himself had noticed. You are mine, the voice thundered from the warp. Each word was the sound of a million screams. My champion, my instrument of eternal war. Varys tried to scream, but found only silence. The mark was rewriting him from the inside out. His bones lengthened, his muscles swelled with unnatural strength, his teeth sharpened to fangs. The transformation wasn't just physical. Memories of his former life began dissolving like sugar in acid. His wife's face blurred, his children's names slipped away. The Imperial Guard regiment he once led with honor became nothing but shadows. In their place came something else. Pure, distilled rage. Every heartbeat now pulsed with the need to kill. Every breath carried the metallic taste of blood. The mark on his forehead throbbed in rhythm with distant battles across the galaxy. He could feel them all. Every drop of blood spilled in Khorne's name fed directly into his consciousness. A space marine's throat opened on Cadia. A cultist's blade found flesh on Armageddon. Each death made him stronger, but strength came with a price. Varys looked down at his hands. Once they had signed deployment orders and held his daughter's tiny fingers. Now they ended in claws that dripped with perpetual hunger for violence. The worst part wasn't the physical changes. It was how right it all felt. The rage wasn't foreign anymore. It was home. The need to kill wasn't madness. It was purpose. Every moral boundary he had once cherished now seemed like weakness to be discarded. Khorne's champions didn't just serve the blood god. They became extensions of his will, living weapons that could never be sheathed. Varys tried to remember why he had resisted for so long. The Imperial Creed spoke of duty and sacrifice. But what was duty compared to this perfect clarity of purpose? What was sacrifice when you gained everything? The mark pulsed brighter. Somewhere in the warp, Khorne smiled. Another soul had been claimed. Another champion had been born. But as Varys embraced his new existence, he failed to notice the subtle changes beginning in his fellow champions around him. The blood god was always hungry, and champions who grew too comfortable often forgot the most important rule of chaos. You never stop climbing the ladder. But what they discovered about the higher rungs would make their current transformation seem like a gentle caress. The scent of burnt flesh still clings to your armor as you stand over the corpses of your former battle brothers. This is what ascension costs. This is what the dark gods demand. Your first recruits don't come willingly. They never do. The captured Imperial guardsmen hang from rusted chains in your ship's belly. Their screams echo through corridors that once carried hymns of the Emperor. The irony tastes like copper and ash. Choose. You whisper to the first prisoner, your voice no longer recognizing itself. Serve the true powers, or feed them with your death. His eyes hold the same terror you once felt. Before the whispers, before the gifts, some break immediately. The weak-willed collapse into gibbering worship, their minds snapping like dry bones. These become your cultists, useful, expendable, perfectly broken. Others resist longer. You admire their defiance even as you crush it. The ritual blade slides between ribs with surgical precision. Blood pools on deck plates that once bore Imperial eagles. Now they're scratched with 8-pointed stars carved by trembling hands. Witness, you command the survivors. This is mercy compared to what awaits the faithful. But your true prize isn't the broken humans. It's the Space Marines, your former brothers from other chapters, captured in raids across a dozen worlds. Their gene seed makes them valuable. Their hatred makes them dangerous. Perfect. Brother Captain Matthias spits blood through his helmet's Vox grill. I know what you were, traitor. I remember your name before you sold it. You lean closer, close enough to smell his fear beneath the righteous fury. Names are chains. You breathe. I am something greater now. The corruption spreads slowly through captured Astartes. Some you break through torture, others through temptation, showing them the power that flows from the warp's embrace. A few require creative persuasion. You drag Matthias to the observation deck. Through the reinforced glass, he watches your warband's latest raid. Civilians flee burning hab blocks while your cultists hunt them through smoke-choked streets. Stop this, he whispers. Join me, and I will. The lie comes easily now. Truth is another chain you've broken. Matthias closes his eyes. When he opens them, something fundamental has shifted. What do you need me to do? Victory tastes like ashes and ambition. Within months, your warband swells beyond recognition. Cultists, fallen Astartes, demon engines that purr with malevolent intelligence. Each soul claimed adds to your patron's strength and to your own. But in the warp's reflection, something vast and hungry watches your progress. It's been waiting for you to gather enough power, enough souls, enough to make the next test interesting. Captain Valerius had served the Emperor for 37 years. 3 decades of unwavering loyalty. Countless battles against Xeno's filth. A record spotless as cathedral marble. But the whispers had been growing stronger. The brass skull hanging from his belt, a trophy from some forgotten campaign, had begun to feel warm against his hip. Not the warmth of body heat. Something deeper. Something hungry. It started during the siege of Mordian Prime. Valerius watched his men die. Good men. Faithful men. Cut down by heretic last fire. While the commissars screamed orders from behind reinforced positions, the skull grew hot. Why do they deserve to live when your brothers die? The voice came from nowhere. From everywhere. From the brass itself. Valerius gripped his chainsword tighter. Commissar Thorne strutted past, his bolt pistol gleaming, his uniform pristine while guardsmen bled out in the mud around him. The man had never seen real combat. Never felt las burn sear flesh. Never earned the right to send others to die. The skull whispered again. Blood for the blood god. Something snapped. Valerius moved without thinking. His chainsword roared to life, its teeth spinning in a blur of adamantine fury. Thorne turned, confusion flickering across his face. The blade took him at the neck. Blood sprayed in a crimson arc across the trench wall. Hot copper filled Valerius's nostrils. The commissar's head rolled into the mud, eyes still blinking in shock, and the skull sang. Pure ecstasy flooded Valerius's veins. Every nerve ending screamed with pleasure. The pain of 37 years, every lost friend, every senseless order, every moment of doubt, washed away in a tide of red rapture. This was what he'd been missing. This was what the Emperor had denied him. The other guardsmen stared in horror. Some raised their laser guns, others backed away, terror written across their faces. Valerius smiled, blood dripping from his chainsword. Who's next? But as the words left his lips, he felt something else. A presence. Ancient. Vast. Approving. Khorne had noticed him, and somewhere in the warp, brass collars were being forged. The real transformation hadn't even begun. Karn the Betrayer stands before the brass throne of Khorne, his chain-axe gore-child still dripping with the blood of his former battle brothers. The transformation has already begun. His skin cracks like dried leather, revealing molten brass beneath. Each heartbeat pumps liquid fire through veins that once carried imperial loyalty. The pain is exquisite, a symphony of agony that Khorne savors like fine wine. You have pleased me, mortal. The blood god's voice thunders through dimensions, each word a physical blow that drives Karn to his knees. Around him, the brass citadel stretches into infinity, a monument built from the skulls of 10 billion worlds. Karn's memories fracture and reshape themselves. His childhood on New Syria becomes a blur of blood and violence. His time as a World Eater captain transforms into an endless hunger for slaughter. Even his friendship with Angron warps into something darker, more primal. The brass spreads up his arms like infection. Where it touches, his humanity dies. I was loyal once, Karn whispers, his voice already changing, deepening into something inhuman. Khorne laughs, a sound like colliding planets. Loyalty is weakness. Honor is chains. You are free now, champion. The title hits Karn like a physical force. Champion. Not just any follower, but one of the chosen few. One of the damned. Elite who carry their patron god's will across the galaxy. His armor fuses with his flesh, becoming part of him. The brass spreads across his face, his eyes becoming pools of molten gold. When he speaks again, his voice carries the authority of a living weapon. What would you have me do, my lord? Khorne's answer comes not in words, but in visions. Karn sees himself leading armies of demons across burning worlds. He watches Imperial Guard regiments flee before his advance. He tastes the terror of space marines who once called him brother. The visions show him something else. Other champions, scattered across the galaxy. Each one a living avatar of their god's will. Each one more monster than man. You will gather them, Khorne commands. My champions, my instruments of war. Karn nods, understanding flooding through his transformed mind. This is just the beginning. Becoming a champion isn't an ending. It's a doorway to something far worse. He turns to leave the brass citadel, his new form crackling with unholy power. But as he steps toward the mortal realm, Khorne's final words follow him like a curse. Remember, champion, even gods can be disappointed. The first thing Vex learned about commanding Chaos warriors was that they could smell weakness, like predators circling wounded prey. His new war band gathered in the ruins of what had once been a shrine to the Emperor. 43 souls who had already tasted damnation. Their eyes held the same hunger that now burned in his own chest. The air reeked of sulfur and old blood. Vex stood before them, his new mutation still raw and weeping. The tentacle that had replaced his left arm writhed with its own alien intelligence. When he spoke, his voice carried harmonics that hadn't been there before. You followed me because Khorne showed you strength, he said. Each word felt like swallowing broken glass. But strength without purpose is just butchery. A scarred woman with brass teeth laughed. Purpose. We're here to kill, champion. Nothing more. Vex's enhanced senses caught the subtle shift in the group's posture. Testing him. Measuring him. This was the moment every new champion faced. Command through fear or lose everything to the next ambitious killer. He moved faster than human reflexes should allow. The tentacle wrapped around the woman's throat, lifting her off the ground. Her feet kicked uselessly at empty air. Purpose, Vex repeated, his voice now carrying the rumble of distant thunder, is what separates champions from corpses. He could feel Khorne's approval washing through him like warm honey mixed with acid. The blood god rewarded those who understood that even chaos needed structure. The woman's eyes bulged. Her brass teeth clicked together in a desperate rhythm. Vex set her down gently. We're going to take the Meridian sector, he announced. 17 Imperial worlds, 40 billion souls to offer the blood god. The temperature in the ruined shrine seemed to drop 10 degrees. Even the most battle-hardened warriors shifted uncomfortably. "Impossible," someone whispered. "Exactly." Vex smiled, and his new fangs caught the dim light. Khorne doesn't reward the possible. He rewards the impossible. He could see the change happening in their faces. Fear transforming into something hungrier, more dangerous. This was how warbands were truly born, not through recruitment or conscription, but through the promise of glorious impossibility. "Each world we take makes us stronger," Vex continued. "Each victory feeds the next. By the time we reach the sector capital, we won't be raiders anymore." He paused, letting the silence stretch like a blade. "We'll be a legion." The brass-toothed woman knelt first, then another. Within moments, 43 killers had bent the knee to their new champion. But Vex barely noticed their submission, because in the shadows beyond the shrine, something else was watching. Captain Thaddeus Corvin stood at the edge of the Imperial Shrine World's capital. 3 months ago, he'd been the Emperor's most faithful servant. Now, crimson sigils carved into his power armor pulsed with unholy light. The transformation had been gradual. First came the whispers during meditation, then the dreams of burning thrones. Finally, the moment when Khorne's voice thundered through his skull like molten brass, "Spill blood for the blood god." Corvin's enhanced hearing caught the prayers echoing from the cathedral below. 10,000 pilgrims knelt before golden Aquilas, their voices rising in hymns he once cherished. The irony tasted like copper on his tongue. His new patron demanded a worthy offering, not just any slaughter, a consecration that would stain this holy ground forever. Corvin activated his Voxcaster. "Begin the assault." Chaos Space Marines emerged from drop pods like falling stars. Their ceramite boots cracked marble steps as they advanced through screaming crowds. But Corvin moved alone toward the cathedral's heart. This was his test, his first true act as Khorne's chosen. The massive doors bore the Emperor's seal, a two-headed eagle that had once filled him with pride. Now it seemed to mock him with golden eyes. Inside, the High Confessor raised his Crozius Arcanum. "Heretic, you dare defile this sacred Corvin's Chainsword," roared to life. The blade, once blessed by imperial priests, now dripped with demonic ichor. Each tooth had been reforged in the fires of the warp. The confessor's head rolled across consecrated stone. Blood splattered the altar's white marble. Steam rose where it touched blessed silver. Then something shifted in the cathedral's shadows. The temperature dropped to 20 degrees. Frost formed on stained glass windows, depicting the Emperor's glory. Corvin felt eyes upon him. Not human eyes, but something vast and hungry watching from beyond the veil. His patron was pleased. Power flooded through his veins like liquid fire. His muscles swelled beneath ceramite plates. New strength, new speed, new hunger for violence. This was what ascension felt like. But as he turned to leave, Corvin glimpsed his reflection in the altar's polished surface. His face had changed. Where human features once existed, brass plates now covered half his skull. His left eye burned with crimson flame. The man named Thaddeus Corvin was dying. Something else was being born. Outside, his warriors finished their butchery. 10,000 pilgrims lay dead in the cathedral square. But this was only the beginning of Corvin's service to chaos. The real horror hadn't even begun. The warp storm screams across 3 sectors. Its crimson lightning tears reality like wet parchment. Inside this maelstrom of pure chaos, something impossible is being born. Captain Vex Mortalis stands before the Forge of Souls. His power armor weeps blood from every joint. The metal itself has begun to hunger. For 6 months, he has served Khorne faithfully. Skulls pile at his feet like autumn leaves. But the blood god demands more than slaughter. He demands sacrifice. Your blade has tasted 10,000 deaths, whispers the demon bound within the forge. Its voice is molten brass and screaming children. But it remains merely steel. Vex's chainsword trembles in his grip. The weapon that once served the Emperor now thirsts for something darker, something alive. The ritual circle burns with symbols that hurt to perceive. Each mark carved with the bone of a saint. Each line drawn in the blood of innocence, but the price isn't what he expected. Your memories of honor, the demon purrs. Your love for your battle brothers, your final shred of humanity. Feed them to the blade, Vex hesitates. He remembers Captain Thorn, his closest friend. Remembers the oath they swore beneath Terra's golden sky. Remembers believing they fought for something pure. The chainsword's teeth begin to glow. I can feel them dying, Vex whispers. His voice cracks like breaking glass. My brothers. They're calling for help. The demon laughs. It sounds like cities burning. Yes. Your old company fights the Tyranids on Mordian Prime. They are losing. They need their captain. Vex's hand shakes. The blade grows heavier with each heartbeat. But if you stop now, you remain weak. Mortal. Useless to your new god. The warp storm intensifies. Reality bleeds at the edges. Through the crimson veil, Vex sees flashes of the battle. His former brothers dying, screaming his name, begging for salvation that will never come. Choose. The demon hisses. Power to serve Khorne, or the pathetic hope of redemption. Vex closes his eyes. When he opens them, they burn with unholy fire. He plunges the chainsword into his own chest, not to die. To feed it his heart, the blade drinks deep. His memories of love dissolve like sugar in acid. His capacity for mercy evaporates. His soul becomes a hollow vessel for rage. The chainsword transforms. Its teeth become fangs. Its motor becomes a beating heart. Its blade weeps blood that never dries. Vex pulls the demon weapon from his chest. The wound seals instantly, but something vital is gone forever. He can no longer remember why he once cared about his brother's screams. But that was just the beginning of what the weapon would demand. Commander Vex stood before the assembled masses of his warband, watching 10,000 corrupted souls kneel in the blood-soaked sand. The transformation was complete now. What had begun as a single Space Marine's fall to chaos had become something far more terrible. A legion of the damned, bound to his will through pain and promise. The air reeked of sulfur and burnt flesh. Each warrior bore the marks of their patron god, some with flesh that writhed like living metal, others with eyes that burned like dying stars. The sounds of their breathing created a symphony of corruption that echoed across the wasteland. You are no longer what you were. Vex's voice carried across the assembled horde, amplified by the warp itself. You are instruments of divine will. This was the true power of a Chaos Champion. Not just personal corruption, but the ability to corrupt others. To take the innocent and remake them in darkness, his lieutenant, once a proud Imperial Guard captain, now bore tentacles where his arms should be. The man's eyes still held traces of who he used to be, flickers of regret that made his servitude all the more complete. The Imperium believes in order. Vex continued, feeling the psychic weight of the devotion pressing against his mind like a physical force. We will show them the beauty of chaos. The warband's first target lay 3 systems away. a shrine world called Benediction, home to 12 million pilgrims who gathered to pray for the Emperor's protection. Vex could taste their faith from here. Sweet and pure, like honey waiting to be poisoned. He raised his demon weapon, a blade that screamed with the voices of every soul it had claimed. The sound cut through the air like breaking glass, and his followers responded with roars of bloodthirsty approval. "We march at dawn," he declared, "and we will paint the stars red." As his warband dispersed to prepare their vessels, Vex felt the familiar whisper of his patron god, the voice that had guided his transformation from loyal servant to herald of damnation. "Well done, my champion. But this is merely the beginning." Vex smiled, feeling the weight of destiny settling on his shoulders like a funeral shroud. He had become everything the Imperium feared most, a space marine turned against his own kind, leading an army of the damned. But as he turned toward his command ship, something moved in the shadows between the landing craft. Something that shouldn't have been there. Something that wore the colors of his old chapter. Captain Valerius had served the Emperor for 30 years. Now he knelt before a throne of fused skulls, brass gleaming wet with blood that never dried. The air tasted of copper and burning bone. Khorne's realm stretched endlessly around him. Mountains of weapons pierced crimson skies. Rivers of blood carved channels through battlefields where the dead fought eternal wars. Valerius felt his new strength coursing through veins that pulsed black. His armor had grown into his flesh, brass spikes erupting from shoulders that once bore imperial eagles. "You have pleased me, champion." The voice came from everywhere and nowhere. Khorne's presence pressed against Valerius's mind like molten metal. Memories flashed unbidden. His first kill as a Chaos Champion. How easily the blade had sliced through his former battle brother's throat. The intoxicating rush as warm blood splattered his face. That was 3 months ago, or 3 centuries. Time meant nothing here. "Your hunger grows," Khorne rumbled. "Good." Valerius tried to remember why he'd first turned. His daughter's death? The Imperium's betrayal? The reasons felt distant now, like echoes in a vast cavern. Only the killing mattered. He watched demon princes sparring in the distance, their weapons carving reality itself. Each had once been mortal. Each had climbed this same bloody ladder. "You wonder about ascension," Khorne said, reading his thoughts. "About becoming more than flesh." Valerius nodded. His throat had forgotten how to form words of prayer to the Emperor. Only screams of rage emerged now. "Then you must prove yourself worthy. One final test." The brass throne shifted, skulls grinding against each other with wet sounds. A portal tore, open beside it, revealing a familiar sight. Terra, the Imperial Palace. Valerius's breath caught. Through the tear in reality, he could see his old regiment, his former captain, men he'd called brothers. "Kill them all," Khorne commanded. "Every last one. Show me that nothing of your former self remains." Valerius felt his heart's hammering against his ribs. Some buried part of him screamed in horror. These were his friends, his family. But the hunger was so strong now. The need to spill blood had become everything. He stepped toward the portal, weapon materializing in his grip. Behind him, Khorne's laughter shook the realm. Valerius paused at the threshold, 1 foot in each reality. Then he saw who was leading his old regiment. But the real horror hadn't even begun. The irony was suffocating. Sergeant Vex stood on the bridge of the Chaos warship, Eternal Torment, watching the purple-black void of the warp tear open like a wound. The familiar stars of the Cadian system blazed ahead. the same stars he'd sworn to protect as an Imperial Guard veteran. Now he was coming home to destroy it. The transformation had been complete for months. His once proud Cadian uniform hung in tatters, replaced by Baroque armor that pulsed with demonic energy. Where his left eye had been, a third eye now wept tears of molten brass, a gift from Khorne for his first 100 kills. But the cruelest joke? He still remembered every face he'd died beside on this very planet. "My lord," whispered his cultist aide, voice trembling through his respirator mask. "The planetary defense grid is hailing us. They recognize your ship's Imperial codes." Vex smiled, feeling his fangs scrape against his lower lip. Of course they did. He'd helped design those very codes during the 13th Black Crusade. The bitter tang of recycled air filled his nostrils, the same air he'd breathed as a loyal soldier. "Open a channel," he commanded, his voice now a grinding rasp that made the bridge crew flinch. The hologram flickered to life. A young Cadian officer appeared, crisp uniform bearing the same regiment insignia Vex had once worn with pride. The boy couldn't have been older than 20. "This is Lieutenant Caney of the 47th Cadian Shock Troops. State your identification and purpose." Vex leaned forward into the light, letting the officer see what he'd become. The boy's face went white as parchment. Behind him, Vex could hear other voices, panicked, disbelieving. "Hello, Lieutenant," Vex purred, savoring each word like fine wine. "Tell me, do they still teach recruits about Sergeant Marcus Vex, the hero of Kasr Myrak?" The lieutenant's hands shook as recognition dawned. You're supposed to be dead. The records say..." "The records lie." Vex's third eye wept fresh brass. "I've come home, boy, and I've brought friends." Behind the warship, the warp continued tearing open. Shapes moved in the purple darkness, massive, hungry shapes that had been waiting decades for this moment. But what Lieutenant Caney said next made even Vex pause. Marcus stood atop the rusted cathedral spire, watching his new disciples gather in the wasteland below. The acrid smell of burning promethium mixed with the metallic tang of spilled blood. 3 months since his transformation. 3 months since Khorne had claimed him. The first to answer his call was Vex, a former tech priest whose augmetics now wept oil and ichor. His mechanical limbs twitched with barely contained violence, servo skulls circling his head like carrion birds. "My lord." Vex's vox grill crackled with static. "The word-bearers have sent an emissary." Marcus felt the skull throne's weight pressing against his consciousness. Every new follower fed the hunger growing inside him. Every oath of allegiance made the whispers louder. Below, more warriors emerged from the ash storms, a squad of renegade space marines, their armor painted in fresh blood sigils. Cultists dragging chains of screaming prisoners, a demon engine that left molten footprints in the permacrete. This was how Chaos Champions built their power. Not through politics or diplomacy, but through fear and worship. Marcus descended, his boots clanging against metal grating. Each step sent tremors through the structure. His presence alone made the air shimmer with psychic pressure. "Brothers," his voice carried across the gathering, amplified by unholy energies. "We are no longer servants of a corpse god. We serve something alive." The crowd pressed closer. Marcus could taste their desperation, their hunger for purpose. These weren't just soldiers anymore. They were believers. Vex activated a holoprojector. Star charts flickered to life, showing Imperial supply routes and defense grids. "The Cadian Gate remains vulnerable here, my lord. 3 regiments. Minimal orbital support." Marcus studied the tactical display, but his mind wandered to darker calculations. How many skulls would satisfy Khorne? How much blood would buy him a demon prince's wings? The transformation wasn't just physical anymore. Every decision felt weighted with cosmic significance. Every choice pulled him further from his former humanity. "We strike at dawn," Marcus declared. The warband roared approval, weapons raised skyward. But as the cheers echoed through the ruins, Marcus caught sight of movement in the shadows. A figure watching from the cathedral's broken windows. Someone who shouldn't be there. Someone from his past. The figure stepped into the light, and Marcus's blood turned to ice. Because standing there, very much alive, was Captain Theron, the man he'd watched die on Mordian Prime. The first world dies in silence. Kalen stands on the bridge of his corrupted battle barge, watching through the viewport as Tertius Prime burns below. The planet's atmosphere glows orange and red, cities melting like candle wax under his fleet's bombardment. The smell of ozone and burnt metal fills his nostrils. His new form towers over the command deck, 8 feet of twisted muscle and bone, his skin now a mottled gray that shifts and writhes with each heartbeat. "My lord," his lieutenant whispers, voice trembling. "The population centers are gone. 4 billion souls." Kalen feels each death like a drop of wine on his tongue. The sensation should horrify him. Instead, it fills him with electric pleasure that races down his spine. This is what champions do. They harvest. His clawed fingers trace the tactical display. 17 more worlds lie within striking distance. Agricultural planets, mining colonies, forge worlds churning out weapons for the Imperium. All of them will burn. "Set course for Valdris," he commands. His voice has changed too. Deeper now, with harmonics that make his crew's ears bleed. The forge world falls next. But as his fleet translates into the warp, something unexpected happens. The ship's voxcaster crackles to life with a transmission from the planet below. "This is Governor Malthius of Tertius Prime." The voice gasps through static. "To any Imperial forces receiving this, we held the line. The children are safe in the underground shelters. They're alive." Kalen freezes. Children, survivors. For one terrible moment, something human flickers behind his eyes. A memory of his own daughter, lost to the plague years ago. The reason he first called out to the dark gods. Then the moment passes. He turns to his weapons officer. "Virus bombs, target the shelter coordinates." "My lord?" The officer's face goes pale. "But they're just children, yes." Kalen's smile reveals teeth like broken glass. The youngest souls burn brightest. The officer's hands shake as he inputs the firing solution. On the screen below, pinpricks of light bloom across Tertius Prime's surface. Each one marks a shelter. Each one marks hundreds of small lives snuffed out. Kalen feels his patron's approval wash over him like warm honey. This is the price of ascension. This is what separates champions from mere mortals. But as the last shelter dies, his Vox officer turns with wide, terrified eyes. "My lord, we're receiving a priority transmission. It's from Terra itself." The blood drains from Kalen's face, because he recognizes the voice that comes through the speakers. Kalen's reflection stared back from his blade's edge. But the face wasn't his anymore. Where human eyes once burned with righteous fury, twin voids of starlight gazed back. His skin had become living marble, veined with gold that pulsed like a heartbeat. Beautiful, terrible, inhuman. The transformation was complete. He tried to remember his daughter's laugh. The sound came back hollow, distorted, like an echo from someone else's life. This was the price every Chaos Champion paid. Not death, something far worse. The gradual erosion of everything that made them human. Kalen's memories felt like reading someone else's diary. His emotions had become alien frequencies he could no longer tune into. Love, fear, hope. These were mortal concepts now, as foreign as breathing underwater. The irony cut deeper than any blade. He had gained power beyond imagination. He could split mountains with a gesture, command legions with a whisper. Reality bent to his will like heated metal, but he could no longer remember why any of it mattered. The demon prince Slanesh had promised him everything, and delivered exactly that, by taking away his capacity to want anything at all. Kalen watched his former battle brothers kneel before him. Their faces showed reverence, terror, awe. He felt nothing. Their devotion was background noise, their fear meaningless static. Once their loyalty would have filled him with pride. Now he observed their worship with the detached interest of a scientist studying insects. This was the ultimate corruption, not becoming a monster, but losing the ability to care that you had. Every Chaos Champion walked this path. They began as heroes, driven by noble goals or desperate circumstances. They made their first bargain believing they could control the darkness. They were always wrong. The Chaos gods didn't break their champions through torture or pain. They broke them through gifts. Each blessing stripped away another layer of humanity until nothing remained but a beautiful, terrible shell. Kalen tried to mourn what he'd lost, but mourning required a heart capable of grief. He possessed neither. The final stage of Chaos Ascension wasn't transformation into something greater. It was the complete annihilation of self, leaving only power wearing the mask of identity. Kalen raised his blade to the screaming sky. Somewhere in the distance, mortal armies clashed over territory that would crumble to dust in cosmic seconds. Their struggles seemed as significant as ants fighting over breadcrumbs. He had transcended humanity entirely, and in doing so, had become less than human. The greatest victory of chaos wasn't corrupting heroes into villains. It was turning them into nothing at all. But deep in the fortress, something stirred that would challenge even a demon prince's certainty. The dropship's engines screamed against Cadia's poisoned atmosphere. Through the viewport, Vex Thorn watched his homeworld burn. The purple sky bled crimson where reality itself had torn open. The fortress world that had once been humanity's greatest bulwark now served as a monument to chaos. He had returned as its destroyer. The irony tasted like copper and ash in his mouth. 20 years ago, he'd stood on these very ramparts as Captain Thorn of the Cadian 47th. He'd sworn sacred oaths to defend this world against the very powers that now coursed through his veins. The transport touched down in what had been Victory Square. Twisted spires of bone and metal pierced the ground where statues of imperial heroes once stood. The air itself whispered with demonic voices. Vex's warband disembarked behind him. Space Marines who had followed him into damnation, their armor bearing the 8-pointed star. They moved with predatory grace, enhanced beyond mortal limits by gifts that would have horrified their former selves. But Vex walked alone toward the ruins of the command bunker. Each footstep echoed with memory. Here, he'd received his first commendation. There, he'd said goodbye to his wife before deployment. The ghosts of his former life seemed to mock him from every shadow. The bunker's blast doors hung open like a screaming mouth. Inside, emergency lighting cast everything in hellish red. The tactical displays still flickered with data from the final battle. Casualty reports, ammunition counts, desperate Vox transmissions that no one would ever answer. Vex found what he'd come for in the commander's quarters. A single picked slate lay on the desk, its screen cracked but functional. His own face stared back at him. Younger, unmarked by chaos, eyes still bright with imperial faith. Beside his image stood his wife Elena and their daughter Mira. They'd died in the evacuation, crushed when a refugee transport took enemy fire. He'd blamed the Imperium for their deaths. Blamed the inefficiency, the bureaucracy, the callous indifference to individual lives. That blame had been the crack through which chaos first whispered. Now he understood the truth. Their deaths hadn't been the Imperium's failure. They'd been his destiny. Every choice, every moment of doubt, every whispered prayer to darker gods. It had all led here, to this moment, to this revelation. He was exactly where chaos had always intended him to be. Vex crushed the picked slate in his augmented fist. But as the fragments fell, something moved in the bunker's deepest shadows. Something that knew his name. Kaelin's transformation was complete. What had once been human flesh now writhed with living metal. Pistons hissed where muscles once flexed. His eyes burned with the cold fire of the warp. But ascension to Chaos Champion came with a price few understood. The voice of Khorne thundered in his skull, no longer a whisper, but a roar that drowned out his own thoughts. Every heartbeat demanded blood. Every breath screamed for slaughter. "Kill them all," the blood god commanded, starting with those you once called brother. Kaelin turned toward his former squad. These men had fought beside him for decades, shared rations in frozen trenches, pulled him from burning wreckage on Cadia Prime. Now their faces twisted with horror as they recognized what he'd become. "Kaelin?" Sergeant Voss whispered. Is that still you?" The newly ascended champion felt his humanity slip away like sand through metal fingers. The blessing of Khorne burned away everything weak, everything soft, everything human. His chainsword roared to life. The blessed blade thirsted for imperial blood. "I remember you." Kaelin's voice emerged as grinding metal. "I remember your weakness." Voss raised his lasgun with trembling hands. "We can fight this, brother. Whatever they've done to you, they've perfected me." The first kill came easy. Too easy. Voss's head separated from his shoulders in a spray of crimson. The blood hissed against Kaelin's blessed armor, each drop feeding the demon engines grafted to his spine. The other guardsmen opened fire. Last bolts splashed harmlessly against his corrupted flesh. Kaelin laughed. The sound echoed like grinding gears. But as he butchered his way through men who'd once called him friend, something unexpected happened. A memory surfaced. Voss pulling him from that burning chimera, sharing his last ration bar during the siege, teaching him to play cards in the mud of the trenches. For one terrible moment, Kaelin felt regret. The emotion burned like acid in his transformed mind. Khorne's rage flared, punishing the weakness. "Kill!" the blood god roared. Feel nothing but rage, but the damage was done. Kaelin realized the true horror of chaos ascension. It wasn't the physical transformation. It wasn't the demonic gifts or the unnatural strength. It was watching yourself become a monster and being powerless to stop it. As the last guardsman fell, Kaelin stood alone among the corpses of his brothers. Blood pooled around his feet. Somewhere deep inside his corrupted soul, the man he'd been was screaming, but the real horror hadn't even begun. Karn the Betrayer stands atop a mountain of corpses. The smell of burned ceramite and spilled blood fills the air. His chain axe Child drips with the remains of his own battle brothers. This is what happens when you become a Chaos Champion. You don't just lead armies. You become the storm itself. Karn's warband stretches across 3 star systems. 12,000 world eaters follow his crimson banner, each one a killer, each one bound to his will through fear and respect. But leadership in chaos is not like the rigid hierarchies of the Imperium. It's earned through blood, maintained through violence, lost in a single moment of weakness. Karn remembers when he first claimed this warband. The previous lord, Skulltaker Vex, had grown complacent, soft. The challenge came at dawn on the demon world of Scalathrax. Vex's head rolled across the obsidian ground before his followers even realized the duel had begun. Now, 2 centuries later, Karn commands not just warriors, but entire fleets. Forged ships that birth demon engines, slave vessels carrying millions of captives. The responsibility weighs nothing. The power intoxicates everything. His champions approach across the battlefield. 12 lords, each commanding their own companies, each one plotting his eventual downfall. This is the burden of chaos leadership. Every victory breeds new rivals. Every moment of triumph plants seeds of betrayal. Lord Vrakthul steps forward, his Terminator armor scarred by 1,000 battles. The Ultramarines fleet approaches, my lord. 3 battle barges, full chapter strength. Karn's grip tightens on Gorechild. The weapon purrs with anticipation. How many of our ships? He asks. 47 vessels. The entire Crimson Fleet. The numbers should favor them. But Karn knows better. Space Marines fight with discipline, coordination, unity, chaos. Champions fight with fury, ambition. The constant knowledge that their own allies might turn at any moment. This is what the Imperium doesn't understand about chaos leadership. It's not just commanding armies. It's surviving them. Every day, Karn must prove his worth. Every battle, he must demonstrate why he deserves to live, while others die. The weight of 12,000 lives rests on his shoulders. Not their welfare, their violence. He shapes their rage, directs their hunger, channels their need for slaughter into something resembling strategy. But as the Ultramarines draw closer, Karn feels something he hasn't experienced in decades. Doubt. Not about victory, about survival. Because in the shadows behind his champions, he sees the subtle signs of conspiracy. The way Vrakthul's eyes don't quite meet his. The positioning of the other lords. They've been planning, but the real question isn't whether they'll betray him during the coming battle. It's whether he'll let them live long enough to try. The fortress world burns beneath your feet. Cadia Prime. The planet that held the line for 10,000 years. Now it cracks like broken glass under the weight of your presence. You stand where you once knelt in prayer. The cathedral's marble floors, polished by generations of faithful boots, now run slick with molten brass. The air tastes of copper and burnt ozone. This is what ascension feels like. The same pews where you whispered litanies to the Emperor now host screaming cultists. Their voices blend into a symphony that makes your demon heart sing. You remember their words, once comforted you. Now you are the comfort they seek. Your former battle brothers arrive in drop pods that thunder like falling stars. You smell their fear through reinforced ceramite. Sweet, familiar, Captain Thaddeus leads them, the man who taught you to hold a bolter, who blessed your first kill in the Emperor's name. He removes his helmet with shaking hands. Brother Marcus? His voice cracks like ice over deep water. You smile with teeth that weren't yours yesterday. Hello, Captain. The recognition in his eyes cuts deeper than any blade. This is the moment every Chaos Champion craves and dreads. The return, the reveal, the perfect circle of corruption. You were him once, righteous, pure, certain. Now you are what he fears most. Not the demon, not the heretic, but the proof that faith can rot from within. You swore an oath, he whispers. You nod. I kept it. I serve the strongest power in the galaxy. The battle lasts 17 minutes. Your claws find every gap in armor you helped design. Your mutations exploit weaknesses you once shared. Thaddeus dies calling your name. Not the name carved on your tomb. Not the title whispered in the warp. The name your mother gave you. The name you buried. As Cadia's sun sets through smoke and ash, you understand the final truth. Chaos Champions don't just fall from grace. They drag everyone they ever loved down with them. In our world, we watch corruption unfold in real time. Politicians, celebrities, heroes who become villains while cameras roll. We click, we share, we consume their fall. Every notification is a prayer to darker gods. When does witnessing become worship? When does watching become complicity? Subscribe if you dare look deeper into the abyss. Some truths stare back. The brass collar burns against flesh that no longer remembers being human. Karn the betrayer stands in the shadow of Khorne's throne. Blood pools at his feet, some his own, most belonging to others. The butcher's nails sing their electric hymn through his skull. This is what victory looks like. 10,000 years of slaughter, 10,000 years of the blood god's favor. The champion who once served the emperor now kneels before a throne built from 1 billion skulls. The irony cuts deeper than any chain axe. He remembers fragments, a captain's honor, a legion's brotherhood, the dream of unity among the stars. But memory is just another enemy to kill. The nails make sure of that. Khorne's voice thunders through dimensions. Blood for the blood god. Karn rises. His chain axe Gorechild purrs with anticipation. There are always more skulls to claim, always more blood to spill. The champion's reward is eternal service. Across the galaxy, new aspirants pledge themselves to chaos. They whisper prayers to dark gods, believing they'll transcend mortality. They dream of power, of freedom from the Imperium's chains. They never ask what happens after the transformation. In corporate boardrooms, ambitious executives climb over colleagues' careers. In gaming communities, players sacrifice friendships for leaderboard positions. In social media feeds, influencers burn bridges for viral content. The pattern remains unchanged, the promise of elevation, the reality of enslavement. Karn remembers his first kill as a champion. The taste of copper, the warmth of arterial spray, the moment he realized the hunger would never end. Now he kills because he must, because the nails demand it, because Khorne requires tribute. Choice died with his humanity. The blood god's latest champion arrives, a former Imperial Guard colonel, fresh from his first transformation. His eyes still hold traces of the man he was. I seek glory, the newcomer declares. Karn almost laughs, almost remembers how to laugh. Instead, Gorechild roars to life. The nails sing their electric song. Blood spatters brass and bone, another skull for the throne. Another lesson in the true price of ambition. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. And in that war, champions are not crowned. They are consumed. Every promotion demands a sacrifice. Every achievement extracts its toll. We tell ourselves we're climbing towards something better. But what if we're only descending deeper into chains we forged ourselves? Subscribe if you dare to question what victory really costs. Some knowledge cuts both ways.